All right. I think we are on time here. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you for logging in. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jason Dahl. I am a certified financial planner and the Director of Financial Planning Services at AFS Financial Group. And I am here today, remotely, of course, with my colleague Alp Adebeck, the founder and managing partner of AFS. I am broadcasting live from my home studio. I just wanted to say that. and this is the latest installment of our monthly financial wellness webinar workshop series on a variety of topics, ranging from Social Security, get it before it's gone, to becoming your own investment analyst, to education planning and student loan strategies, among many others. And we will have some new presentations coming up later this year as well. So we look forward to continuing these. We definitely enjoy putting these together and presenting them, and love seeing all the names as folks log in and participate. And so today we will be discussing what we call What's Next? Life After Work. But first, I just want to go over a few quick housekeeping items. So today's webinar is being recorded, and we will send a link to the recording next week, as well as post it to our website. So we'll email a link, as well as have it available online. I also want to encourage questions at any time during today's webinar. Please don't hesitate if you have anything on your mind, even if something pops in your mind that doesn't seem related to what we're talking about, feel free to fire away. You can ask questions by clicking on the Q&A link at the bottom of your screen. That just opens up a little text box where you can type in a question. We are going to keep all participants muted. It just seems to work better that way, but please feel free to type in questions. But additionally, I want to encourage you to please feel free to follow up directly with us after the webinar if you have further questions or would like to schedule a time for a phone consult. I know I speak for both Alp and me that we truly love what we do and are more than happy to help in a follow-up call, since today's webinar will be a fast-paced, high-level overview of life after work. All right, so nearing retirement, while exciting, can also be a bit daunting, I think, as you start to think about and prepare for the next phase of your life. We aim to help you review the important questions aside from the usual financial ones that you should ask yourself before you make the big decision to retire. In this presentation, we identify your retirement vision and the steps you can take to achieve it, review important considerations to think about while planning your retirement, and discuss additional resources and tips for getting the most out of your retirement years. I'll say one of our primary take-home messages with this presentation is that it really doesn't matter how old you are or where you are currently at in your career. I think everyone can relate to the desire of wanting to be able to make work optional and to only retire once. And this presentation speaks to two things: having the financial wherewithal to work or not work. But what we're going to focus a little bit more on today is jointly knowing it's equally important to think about what you would do with yourself and your time if you didn't work. Or when you retire, perhaps maybe you want to volunteer or open an art studio you've always dreamed of. Or maybe you just want to work less or try something different. All right, so can you fail at retirement? This is one big question that I think many of us may ponder, but shy away from asking. And I guess I'll just be blunt and answer this to say, yeah, you can fail at retirement, but not only can you run out of money, which I think is probably the thing that most people think about, and I'll be honest, that kind of as financial advisors, that's kind of what we're trained to think about is making sure we don't run out of money in retirement, but you can also face what I'll call unforeseen mental struggles in retirement. So for example, we all think we may welcome the freedom of clear schedules, no early alarms, no meetings, and so on, but often many of us miss the daily interactions that we were used to having for so many years. And it's important to plan for that in retirement. And of course, we're getting a strong sense of that now, right? With our normal routines thrown off and being in quarantine, I think we realize just how much simple human interactions are ingrained in our daily lives. I know I love my wife, I love both of my kids, and I love getting to spend all day, every day with them. But I wouldn't mind, a little bit of a change of scenery every now and then. As crazy as this may sound, this may be true for all of you. I kind of look forward to being back in the office again someday. Maybe not as much as it was before, but at least mixing it in a little more. So we often forget we need to think about and plan for the social changes to our daily lives in retirement as well. And I'm going to ask Alp to share one of our favorite stories. I know it's one of my favorite stories about a client that we worked with a few years back. We still work with, but when we were working with him as he transitioned into retirement.
So this is actually my favorite retirement story, and I'll actually I'll say this is actually my favorite webinar. I just think this is just a great topic. So again, favorite retirement story, a long-term client, someone I've known for over 35 years, was a physician from Maryland. He retired in his early 60s and moved to Colorado. He was set financially and ready for his new life in Colorado, hiking and skiing, I'll say anything but work. After enjoying his new routine for a few years, he realized that he missed the challenge and decided to go back to work. Get this, 1 day a month. After doing that for a few months, he decided to make it 1 day a week. And he told the hospital that he would take Fridays because in the winter, the ski slopes were crowded on Fridays and he didn't want to have any part of that. He told us he could barely sleep on Thursday nights because he was so excited to go back to work the next day. So today he works 1.5 days a week at the hospital and 1 day a week at home doing research, which he jokes and says, I was actually doing that for free, so now they're actually paying me. And so he loves it. On a call with him, he mentioned that his friends have been kidding him because he failed retirement. And he was so happy when he told them that was not true. He did it perfectly. He took time off, decided he missed the challenge, and now works part-time doing exactly what makes him happy. For him, it's the perfect retirement. So think about that when you're contemplating what your retirement may look like. And maybe it's going to be something similar to this, but it's just been a favorite story. And for us, it's like defined what it's like working with clients, trying to understand what retirement will be like for them. Jason.
Yeah. Thanks, Al. And I'm going to click here. We couldn't help ourselves, right? We have to talk a little bit about some of the kind of important, and I'll say sort of typical financial or money questions that are usually the first ones that come to mind when we think about our future retirement years, right? Simply, will I have enough, right? Enough money, primarily. And, can I afford to buy a new car? Should I pay off the mortgage, right? Do I still need life insurance? Now, maybe I'm thinking about long-term care insurance when I look forward into my retirement, right? Am I still going to be able to give to charity at the same levels that I did while I was working? Just a side note, we'll talk a little bit more about this later too, and even on the next slide, that like the charitable part is really interesting. We've had a number of clients who have, maybe even if they didn't necessarily continue giving money at the same level that they did while they were working full time, now in a lot of cases they can give a lot more of their time, right, and experience. And so we have a lot of clients that have volunteer a lot for their favorite charities. And so we did have a few questions come in already, and I think actually right now might be a good time for me to just quickly address a couple of these that I think are related. So we had a question around Social Security, right? And should I take Social Security at 62 or later? Now this is the classic. It totally depends. Everybody's situation is different, so I'm gonna punt a little bit on that perhaps, but Social Security is one of my favorite topics. I can geek out on this for a long time. We give separate presentations on Social Security, but just real quick, right? I mean, 62 is the earliest age somebody can start receiving Social Security retirement benefits, but they can wait to as late as age 70. And for every year that you wait, the benefits go up. And it truly depends, right? Do you need the money at 62? Can you afford to wait? Are you still working at 62? Because if you are still working and earning above a modest threshold, they're actually going to offset your Social Security benefits for a while until you get to your full retirement age of somewhere between 66 and 67. Right, so there's a lot of variables that go into it. So I'm just going to kind of leave it at that, because I could use up all of our time just just on Social Security. But
and on that subject, let me throw in one comment. I'll say, and part of that answer is always defined about just your longevity.
Yes.
So if somehow the doctor gives you bad news at age 61, yeah, in those scenarios, it probably makes a lot of financial sense to take Social Security at 62. But again, even that needs to be evaluated.
Yeah, exactly. Are you? Do you have a spouse? Right. All those kind of variables go into determining when's the right time to take Social Security. And then it kind of dovetails in a little bit here to one of the other questions we got. Do you know of any accurate calculating tools to use for a pension that allows for one to factor in a monthly pension amount, ballpark COLA, so that I got cut off here, so that one can determine optimal 403b or 401k distributions? So again,
unshare that screen. There you
go. So again, it really depends, right? Everybody's retirement situation is different, right? You gotta kind of look at the whole picture, and it's really valuable to go through, a full comprehensive kind of retirement analysis, right? To look at, okay, what are your Social Security benefits look like? What are the pension levels? What are the other savings accounts that you have, right? How many years do you think, until you retire and you're going to kick that on, right? All of those variables play into it. And so, but that's absolutely the kind of thing that we love helping folks think through and do different scenario analysis to say, oh, should I perhaps, what kind of portfolio can I build with my 403b going into retirement to generate the income that I desire and need over the course of my retirement? Or to the question of a pension, right? Some people receive a pension, whether it's from their government employment, right? Or some people create their own pensions through purchasing of a private annuity, right? Where they say, hey, I'm going to take a lump sum of my portfolio and recreate a pension. Right, so there's a lot of different ways to think about it, and so there are many calculators, but from our perspective, it's really not a good way to just sort of isolate just doing one sort of singular kind of pension calculator, because it doesn't really take into account all the many other variables that go into your plan to determine, hey, is this the right mix of income and liquidity needs and so on. So, but happy to anyone, especially the person who submitted that question, if you'd like to talk one-on-one, happy to schedule a call to do that. All right, so thank you. Keep the questions coming in. Appreciate it. All right, so now this, I'll say, is kind of our slide that kind of summarizes kind of getting the thought process going for the non-money questions. Right, and this is really kind of what today's workshop is about, right? The questions that are just as important as the financial questions, but that we often forget to ask ourselves until retirement is here, or maybe in some cases until somebody's already in retirement, right? And so where do you want to live? What will you spend your time doing? Can I afford the hobbies that I want to do in retirement? Can I continue to travel and maybe travel more than you were doing when you were working, right? Is there charitable work and volunteerism that I want to do, right? And then family and friends, right? I mean, one of the variables that we often hear people talk about is, if they have kids as well, where are the kids going to kind of settle, and where might grandkids be, right? Those are definitely variables that come into play a lot. So, right, as we're still working, the sort of, I think of that as kind of like our act one, and then retirement is kind of act two, right? Life with work, in some respects, is a little bit easier, I'll say, than life in retirement, in that it provides a lot of structure, right? I realize that structure has changed in our current environment for a lot of folks, if not all of us. But it does provide, a good routine. I sort of refer to it as kind of the wash, rinse, repeat, right? That you get up in the morning, right? Get ready, go to work, come home, right? Pick up the kids from school, that sort of thing. And for a lot of us too, our work sort of becomes what defines us, right? And becomes our image that a lot of people associate with us. And that can be a struggle as you think about, wow, if I go into retirement and I am no longer what I was when I worked, well, who am I now? Right? And this is where we think it's really, really valuable to take some time to think that through, right? And to really imagine your retirement, right? So we have several other workshops that focus on being financially prepared for retirement, but the reality is that you also need to be socially and emotionally prepared for retirement. Take some time to think about and even write down what is important to you and what and whom make you happy, right? If you've ever done a visualization exercise, this is, kind of what we're talking about. This is what we recommend you do to imagine your retirement. And I know for my wife, she has talked in the past about, when she sort of thinks to retirement in the future, she would love to spend part of the year in a small, slow-paced beach town in Uruguay. we had the luxury of visiting there many years ago, and just it always stuck to us. But she says, I want a fast-paced internet connection, right? And to be able to do that for part of the year, right? So that's just one sliver of an example. But the kinds of things to think about, write down, and maybe even have a little notepad, if you will, right? Because things might come to you at different times to say, oh, you know what, that is something I could see myself doing in retirement, or where I would like to be in retirement. Yeah. Alp, did I interrupt you? Did you have something there?
Nope.
Nope. Good. All right. Yeah. So then, right, in a lot of ways, it's about knowing yourself, right? Now it's time to, kind of start fleshing out your ideal retirement. So if you are a very physically active person now, then you are likely to want to be that in retirement, right? Similarly, if you love to travel, then you need to build that into not only the retirement budget, right? But build it into kind of the retirement lifestyle that you're imagining. One of the nice kind of side effects of being able to travel in retirement is that you aren't necessarily stuck to kind of the same travel schedule that everybody else is, right? Especially, with the school calendars, or right, the traditional summer month travel, or the winter, weeks of travel where you can kind of go a little bit off and travel cheaper, perhaps, right? And be able to maybe fit in some new destinations that otherwise perhaps you weren't going to do, because you're like, I don't want to be there with all those people. Right? You can do it on off times. Perhaps you are more of a homebody, right? You're probably going to, not change your stripes, as they say, when you're in retirement. But maybe that means you want to be a homebody closer to the ocean, right, or the mountains, perhaps, right? We also know that even the most active among us will eventually slow down. So you may want to structure your retirement vision and break it into 3 acts. And the term that Alp and I always like to kind of to identify when we think about kind of the 3 time frames or acts of retirement. Think of the first section as your go-go years, right? You're still young, feeling good, fresh out of working full time, you're ready to go. Then you have kind of your slow go years. Hey, you've done a lot of the travel you've wanted to do. Maybe you've painted all the portraits you've wanted to paint, and you just want to kind of settle in a little bit. And then you have what we like to affectionately call the no-go years, right? And those can be very, very different visions of retirement. And so you can take some time to sort of sketch out, okay, yeah, in those go-go years, these are the kinds of things I want to do. And that's really what a lot of folks kind of focus on when they think about retirement. But it's equally important to kind of think beyond sort of that first act of retirement and say, oh yeah, you're right. Maybe as I slow down and as I kind of age, what do I think is going to be important to me? And this is an ongoing process, right? Life happens, things evolve, even in retirement. So if imagining retirement is a challenge for you, so let's face it, right? We've never done it before, then we recommend you start with 3 key questions. And we have a handout where I think these were sent out or will be sent out. That this is on one side of the handout. Just these 3 simple questions. And I think these questions do a great job of kind of summarizing, and you can break these 3 questions into the 3 acts that I talked about, right? Where are you during the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go-go years, right? What are you doing in each of those periods? And who are you with, right? Thinking about friends and family and neighbors and so forth, right? I think kind of structuring it this way is really valuable. I know this might seem a little hokey, but we've experienced it. We've seen it with clients to take time to start thinking about this and writing it down, because it really is just as important to know kind of some of the answers and give some structure to this, just as it is to have that that financial wherewithal and confidence that you can afford your desired retirement, right? And the 2, of course, are intertwined, right? The financial wherewithal needs to be in alignment with your ideal retirement, and vice versa.
Hey, Jason, I'm going to pop up a quick question. It says, do you think the government will extend the 70-year max, such as 72? And I'm
Social
guessing
Security,
that,
just to clarify, I bet. Yep. Yeah. Sorry, Al.
So you think that's a Social Security question, or is that a RMD question?
I was going with Social Security, but it could be either, so we could answer it in either way.
Both ways. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just, from the context of Social Security, right? I mentioned earlier that the latest possible age that you could defer Social Security is to age 70 under current law. Could they bump that to 72? It's possible. I suspect not, just in terms of, in the context of, we hear oftentimes about how the Social Security Administration is running out of money. I don't think that would probably be a variable that they would change, because they don't want to sort of, that sort of extends the options and the trust fund that for Social Security for funding it. It opens up further questions and variables. I think they want to try to kind of contain that better, and I think that they're looking at ways to sort of constrict or restrict benefits, to be honest, going forward. But from an RMD perspective, Al, go ahead.
I'll say from the RMD side, if the question was, are they going to raise the required minimum distribution age for IRAs, that actually was done at the end of the year. So you do not have to take distributions from your IRA until age 72 now. Previously, that was age 70 and a half.
Right. Yep. All right. So if you're married or have a significant other, it's important to take a moment and to share with them, right? And have this discussion, right? Have each of you write down the questions and address that. I chuckle because we've had a couple instances where we've been in discussion with couples, clients, and one member of the couple has mentioned, I really want to do these things, right? I would really love to live here. And we've seen the spouse look at them with just a baffled look, saying, "Oh, really?" And, so it might seem obvious to many of you, but it's just as important, right, to make sure you're on the same page with your loved ones. And I actually want to just take a moment here to kind of share a quick story with a couple that we worked with that I think kind of helps bring a little deeper meaning to sort of, what we're talking about with retirement planning. So several years ago, I know Alp and I, we met with a married couple to update their retirement plan. The wife was set to retire within a matter of weeks, right? And she was planning for the implied full stop from work. And so throughout the many conversations and planning sessions leading up to and throughout that particular meeting, the husband had been clear he intended to work another few years. Simple enough, right? That actually made kind of the financial side of the retirement planning even easier, right? Because he was planning on continuing to work and bring in income from work. So that evening, we had a great meeting with them. Alp and I, along with the clients, knew that they were in great shape for the wife to retire without any worries about them outliving their money or ever being in a situation where she would need to go back to work. So we were all feeling good. About 3 months later, we had a check-in call with them to see how things were going. And during the call, both the wife and the husband were talking about their jobs in the past tense. And so, a little confused, Alp and I finally asked them to clarify, and the husband responded that after our prior meeting, they went out to dinner in downtown Bethesda, close to the office, and they agreed that they'd felt so good about their retirement plan and projection that he just decided to retire too. And it was one of those stories where I know as financial advisors, it just kind of warmed our our hearts, knowing that, hey, they had kind of felt that confidence and comfort level of striking that balance, that not only financially they felt good, but I remember we talked a lot about, the things that they wanted to do, the things that they wanted to do around their house together and with their family, and some of the travel and spending more time at the beach, and so they just really struck that balance together.
And I think like the meetings that we have at times, really, when we go over those type of questions, what do you want to do? It really gets people to think, possibly for the first time, what life will look like for them in retirement, the things they want to do. And as Jason mentioned earlier, where sometimes they're surprised at some of the thoughts that their partner had.
All right, I'm going to turn this over to Alp for a moment. Take the lead.
Sure. So it's my belief that baby boomers are going to redefine retirement. I think they're going to push back retirement, some because they have to, but many because they want to, and they still enjoy what they do. And so I think about my own situation as I continue to slowly and gracefully age. I think about how I want to approach retirement. And for me, I want to start working at some point 4 days a week. And when I say that, and a lot of people talk about something like, get an extra day off a week, it really means that on that 5th day, you're not working. So you're not answering emails, you're not returning phone calls. And if you think about that, if you can accomplish that, if that's your first transition into retirement, you're going from a 2-day weekend to a 3-day weekend. So essentially you get 50% more weekend. Another thing to do is, if possible, not everyone can do it because it really depends on the job, but if you can hold a test run, if you could take a sabbatical, most people they take 7 to 10 days off. Rarely do we hear people tell stories where they're taking a 2-week vacation. But if you could take off, 1, 2, or 3 months and really see if this is something that you want to do, and do you have the hobbies? So taking that sabbatical is really a good option. And also, what we see people doing transition into retirement is that they actually still want to work. They're just burned out of what they've done, possibly for 40 years, and so they talk about just different jobs. And we've had people say that, I just want to work at like a simple job somewhere where I don't have the pressure, maybe something that incorporates one of my hobbies. So think about that. So, retirement might mean the early stages, a much less stressful job, one that actually might still maintain benefits if you need benefits, but it's something that you really enjoy doing. And it might be working for a charity, not for free, but actually just working for a charitable organization, something that you believe in, and they happen to have a salaried position that comes with benefits. So, think about like how you can transition into retirement. And, like the worst case scenario, essentially, is you can always go back to work. Like if you were to take a full retirement and you just didn't enjoy it, think of the story we already talked about, you can always go back to work. Next slide.
Yeah.
And so when you think about retirement, and Jason's already gone over some of this, you've got to think about what you're going to be funding in retirement. And if your goal is to travel a lot or spend 3 months a year in Florida, like we have more and more of our clients that want to spend 3, 4, 5 months a year down in Florida just to get away from the winter months up in, just the more northern parts of the country. you've got to be realistic. You've got to work that into your budget to make sure that it can happen. So at times it means you're going to have to make some tough choices to make sure you have that money for your dream retirement. So think about what you're going to be funding, how much is it going to be costing you, and then look at your budget, and I'll say realistically. And so this next slide actually really ties into this really well. So in order to prepare yourself for retirement, I always like to say you need to act like a chief financial officer and review your current expenses. I started thinking of that phrase years ago in one of the past recessions, and I've always felt that when you go through a recession, it makes you focus on your expenses. So if income was cut in some way, shape, or form, you kind of want to offset that a little bit, and you evaluate what you're spending your money on. But thinking about that really will help you prepare for retirement. And so I like this phrase, like act like a business and cut any unnecessary expenses. And so again, think of your top priorities, how important they are to you, and maybe you're spending money on some things that really, you might just do once a blue moon. I'll give an example. At times we've had people that have boats, and they say they use the boat once or twice a year, but it costs them $10,000. So they're probably better off just renting a boat for 1 or 2 days a year and enjoying it like that. But, at times making some tough decisions. It might mean downsizing. So if you've got multiple homes, maybe you can still maintain multiple homes, but your so-called main home, you just don't need as big of a place. And so you can downsize. And we've seen a lot of clients basically go from a big house somewhere to renting an apartment in their city where a lot of their friends are, and then they've maintained a second home somewhere else where they spend a lot of time, but they've really cut back on a lot of expenses. And if you happen to live in a state with high state income taxes, it might mean relocating, or if you happen to have high property taxes for the house that you own, you might say, what, if I sell the house, I can get out of paying $15,000, $20,000 a year in real estate taxes, and that really can make retirement a lot easier for you. So think about this phrase, act like a business and cut any unnecessary expenses.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's good advice, honestly, for anybody at any age to periodically put that personal CFO hat on, right? To just audit the expenses, right? But, it's especially important kind of as you're approaching retirement to think about that, right? Not only in the context of just sort of that going through the thought process of what's truly important to me, right? I think, and you can kind of start assigning values to, hey, I spend money on certain things that I just don't really get any value out of this, as Alp was talking about, right? Or I could get value out of it in a much lower cost way. And then one of the other things that comes to my mind is Alp was sort of talking about the, kind of the transition to retirement and kind of the test run component of it. A lot of folks kind of think to themselves, well, I want to keep the local house, whether that be, staying in their current house or maybe downsizing to an apartment or condo where they are, but I want to have a second home. But if you're not, just 100% positive that exactly, the town, the region, the city, the neighborhood, right, the house itself, that you are totally confident that, yeah, this is what we want to have, what we want to buy, right? All those, the expenses that go into buying a new house, oftentimes we recommend take a step back and just go rent somewhere for a few months or a year and make sure, oh yeah, this is where we want to be. And now you get serious about buying the house, rather than kind of buying the house and then later realizing, oh yeah, we didn't really, maybe you loved that town, but you were like, wow, I really wish we were over in the other neighborhood, right, across town. So that's just another kind of simple tool or tip that we've seen folks employ that's worked well. All right, so Alp talked a little bit about kind of benefits, right? And the idea of where we're seeing more and more folks maybe just say, hey, I need a change of pace. I've been at this current job too long, but maybe I still want to do something. I still want to be productive, and perhaps I'd still want or need some benefits. Right, and really kind of the big one in my mind there is health insurance benefits, and it's important to remember that you're not eligible for Medicare health insurance until you're 65, right? And so if you're looking to separate service, right, or leave your current job that provides some health insurance benefits prior to age 65, that's a big variable financially to be thinking about, right? And that's where, as Alp was saying, a lot of folks may say, you know, I'm okay with taking a different job that maybe is much lower pay, but it's much lower stress, and I know that I'm not working weekends, I'm not working evenings, right? But hey, it provides some health benefits that can be a huge bridge, or a really valuable bridge to get somebody to age 65 and Medicare, right? Just another quick note, just remember, even once you're on Medicare, it's not free, right? There are multiple components to Medicare. There's Part A is free, but that's just hospitalization coverage. But then you've got Parts B and D, the prescription drug coverage and the supplemental coverage, and all of those you do pay premiums. And so you need to, of course, build that into the budget. Yep, Alp.
I'll say on that subject, just to put it into context a little bit too, when we talk about the importance of the benefits for somebody that's trying to retire at an early age prior to being eligible for Medicare, like when we look at the dollar amount of those premiums, we've just seen an explosion of cost, I'll say, over the last 5 to 7 years, where, you know, we're now getting clients telling us that they're retiring early, but their healthcare premiums have gone from, you know, $500-600 a month to $2,000 a month, and I'm going to say for pretty bad coverage, where they could actually still have a $10,000 deductible. So, you know, thinking about that if you're trying to retire early, it really is a big factor.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. I just wanted to comment about the cost of Medicare premiums. You could probably, a fair budget for monthly expenses currently, if you're just kind of sketching it in to say, hey, once I'm on Medicare and I'm paying premium for the various Medicare coverages, a fair budget line would be, I would say, $400 a month per person, right? For a lot of folks, it's a little less than that. For other folks, it's a little higher than that. But just kind of as if you're doing some of your own initial budgeting, hey, what should I figure on paying premium for Medicare? $400 a month is a reasonable number to sketch in there. And then just
and that formula is income based, basically.
Yes. Yep. Yep. And then we have this third bullet on here, just because it's one of the most common, I'll say, misconceptions or misunderstandings about Medicare. It's just important to remember, Medicare does not cover or pay for any long-term care expenses, right? That's really all you need to remember when you're thinking about, you know, expenses for whether it be nursing home, assisted living, or someone kind of coming into your home to provide assistance, right? Medicare is health insurance. Long-term care is not health care, it's custodial care, maintenance care. So just an important note, because it's misunderstood a lot. A couple other, you know, key variables, not only from a financial perspective of retirement, right? Like thinking about how long might I live, how many years does my retirement plan need to fund, but also in the context of kind of the 3 acts of retirement, right? How many years might you have in the go, slow go, and no go years? And we just, it's just such an important variable. We always like to kind of touch on it, is thinking about longevity. Alp touched on it from the Social Security perspective, right? I mean, it really does play into everything when you're kind of running calculations for retirement and thinking about different scenarios, right? And so as you see here, this is just kind of under current actuarial figures, you know, nationwide, that for a married couple, each age 65, you can see here what the kind of the nationwide percentages of man or woman making it to age 95. But I will add, for folks that have lived in more urban areas where they've had, you know, access to good health care, where they've had a professional career, where they've had good health insurance, and just kind of, I'll say, lived a little bit healthier lifestyle than the national average, these numbers actually kind of underestimate the odds, right? When you start to sort of slice and dice it by sort of region and demographic, the percentages are actually higher for some folks. So to just keep that in mind. And then the other variable that we always like to just make sure that gets discussed is inflation. All right, just the simple concept that your first year of retirement, right, the expenses for travel or gas, notwithstanding kind of the current environment for gas. Maybe that's not a great example, but travel and many other expenses. Buying a second house, right? Things cost more in the future, right? Simple concept we're all familiar with, but it's essential to kind of build that into the retirement plan. Thinking about, okay, what might healthcare cost? That's probably the single biggest variable, I'll say, that inflation really impacts when you're projecting into retirement, right? Not only the premiums, but the out-of-pocket expenses. And then if you layer on, the combination I talked about a moment ago, healthcare and long-term care expenses, right? And just the reality is, and Alp and I have talked about this every year for many years, you just think, man, there's no way healthcare and long-term care expenses can just keep going up at the pace that they've been going up at 5, 6, 7% a year. Similar to college bills, but hopefully for most folks, right, that's in the rearview mirror when you're in retirement. But the reality is that they just keep going up at 5, 6, 7% a year. And the reality is that when you look at most people's kind of retirement plan and you look at the total spending for healthcare over whether it's a 20, 25, 30-year retirement, the national averages say that about 90% of all of the money spent on healthcare, whether it be premium or out-of-pocket expenses, are spent in the last 2 to 3 years of life. It's just it's remarkable to think about, but that's just a really important to keep in mind when you're thinking about, right, those phases of retirement. That while maybe the travel goes from the slow go to no go, right, and that budget kind of levels out and then reduces, but other expenses maybe peaking later in life.
And we see it time after time when working with clients or with helping clients with their parents. Mm-hmm. It's just the end of life period where, if somebody is in a nursing home, it really can be just thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of times per month of medical expenses out of pocket. So yeah, you just got to think about that and also think about the inflation aspect of it.
Great. So we wanted to do this in about 45 minutes, so we are very close. So we're gonna, on the home stretch here, the last couple slides. So just kind of a recap slide here. All right, we've kind of focused primarily on what I'll sort of affectionately refer to as sort of the softer side of retirement planning, right? Thinking about and answering those questions, right? Where are you? Who are you with? What are you doing in retirement? Because as I said before, you need to kind of bridge those and balance those with, okay, what's your financial situation looking like, and can you afford the two? And maybe it means, well, actually, both in terms of I want to, but I need to work part-time in retirement, right? Maybe you're not ready for just a full stop from full-time work to full-time retirement. Maybe you're going to transition there. We see more and more of that. And that can serve multiple purposes. It's just a great way of kind of helping with the mental and social transition, but also the financial transition, right? If you're able to just keep some income coming in, maybe even just to break even, right? And not necessarily even still saving for retirement anymore, but you're not having to tap into retirement, or you're able to continue to defer Social Security, right? But just working enough to afford that can be a really valuable way of kind of pushing the retirement plan over the edge of success. And then, Alp, do you have a couple of those other questions in front of you there?
I do. I have one that says, if you're planning to retire next year, how long should I wait to retire now due to the coronavirus and how that impacted funds? So when do you think the balance of the 401k will return back to par? Par, I'm assuming, being kind of the peak value. But Jason, if you want to take that.
Sure. I mean, it's I'm going to put it kind of in the context of the retirement analysis and that we do when we work with clients. And it's important to recognize that retirement for most people, right, is many years, right? It's not like you stop work and now you need all the money that you had in retirement, right, to be at its peak value in that context, right? And so what we do is we run different scenarios, not only in kind of your own personal life and thinking about different expense levels, but perhaps most importantly, kind of different scenarios of the returns in your portfolio, right? And recognizing that it's part science and part art. You can't perfectly time or know with any certainty that perfectly time, hey, right now is the time to retire, right? Because the markets are in the best place to be for retirement. So that's where we use a statistical analysis tool that's called a Monte Carlo analysis that says, hey, looking at many different sequences of returns, right? And the reality is you can't perfectly time the retirement and know that you're at your the ideal time of retirement, right? And just kind of in context, if you go through a retirement plan and you say, hey, I'm in good shape to retire at a time when the markets have already sold off, that is actually a good prognosis for future returns, right? Because you may say, hey, odds are the early year returns might be a part of a recovery, right? Because what can be detrimental to a retirement plan is if you retire, you start drawing money out of the plan while the markets are selling off, right? So those first few years of retirement are really critical to not sort of compound your portfolio on the way down. And that's where there are different techniques and strategies, from maintaining liquidity levels and cash needs to not have to tap into the equities, maybe working part-time to, like we said, break even to not have to tap into the portfolio, right? There's a lot of ways to kind of mitigate that, but it really is important to analyze that in the context of an overall retirement plan.
And then possibly, working part-time, Jason mentioned that you wouldn't be tapping into it, but potentially you'll be tapping less into it also. Yep. So for example, if you thought you're going to be pulling $80,000 a year out of your retirement funds to maintain your standard of living, if you work part-time, maybe you could cut that down to $40,000, right? So it makes it a lot easier to work through the early years of retirement. There was a study by American Funds a number of years ago talking about the luck of retirement, and Jason was talking about some of that, is where if you think about the person that retired in the year 2000 before the tech bubble burst, in that scenario, they retire, market goes down 50+%. That was a very difficult time to retire. But if somebody retired in 2009, after we've gone through this credit crisis, really, as Jason said, like that's when, oh, wow, things really look good. And I have an example. When I used to do tax work back in the 80s, I had a number of clients that basically retired in the early 80s, and they had more money in 1999 than they started with in retirement, because there was about an 18 or 19 year good run in the market without any major sell-offs. So again, it's like the luck and the timing of retirement, but all that really should be factored in to your overall retirement plan, that you've got a cushion in there, because we know there's going to be further downturns. If that's the one thing that we can guarantee in the world of finances, is that there's always going to be corrections and bear markets in the future.
It is cyclical.
And I have one question, I'm guessing almost like a half joke from a friend on an investment committee, and it says, when will the S&P hit 4,000? And I'm going to say your guess is as good as mine right now. So I will kid that person the next time I see them. We've been amazed at the recovery in the markets. And one of the things that we've noticed is that it really hasn't been a uniform recovery. If you break down the S&P 500 into the 11 sectors that make up the S&P 500, it's not uniformed returns, where it's like, just like the old real estate adage, location, location, location. Right now, post, I'll say COVID economy, it really is about sector, 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 where the sectors that have been least affected by the virus or the collapse in energy prices really have almost returned to full health, where I'll say the sectors like energy, financials, and the industrials have been hit really hard and have yet to come anywhere near back to, peak value. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? I don't know if Natalie, I see actually one more.
I see. I have one more here. It's a good one. Retiring at 63 or 64, would it be better to pull from 401k or file for Social Security and supplement with 401k? I feel like I will get more Social Security over remainder of life if I start early, correct? So it's another one of those, it really depends. And what I'm going to try to kind of explain here, and this is what we do, because this is right at the core of a lot of questions that we help clients sort of think through is, when should I take Social Security, right? I talked earlier, and it sounds like you're going to be retired, so no income from work, because at 63 or 64, that is filing early. So if you were still earning, your Social Security benefits would be withheld. So I'm going to assume there's no work there, so that's not an issue. But then it really kind of becomes a question of sort of the ratio of how much do you need to be pulling out of the 401k in your overall retirement portfolio, and then related to the ratio that the Social Security income can kind of replace there, right? Because it's not sort of a perfect straight line answer. What we've seen is kind of depending on sort of the withdrawal rate, or that ratio that you're pulling out of the portfolio. There's a point at which you're absolutely right. It makes more sense to start taking out of the Social Security, so that you're not overly taxing or overly stressing the portfolio in those early years. But then you can kind of get to a point where, if the portfolio is large enough in relation to that withdrawal amount, for a lot of folks, it makes sense to defer the Social Security further, go ahead and take a little bit more out of the 401k, collect those what are called delayed retirement credits. So for each year that you wait for Social Security, they're just automatically growing your benefit by 8%, which is a pretty darn good guaranteed rate of return, right? And so over the course of your life, then while you might be drawing more out of the portfolio early, you're going to be drawing a lot less out later when you do kick on the Social Security. But then all of that, you need to sort of look at different life expectancies, right? Because it really just kind of depends on, okay, how many years in total are you projecting to be funding, right? So if you expect to live a long life, then that you want to sort of run a scenario analysis there. If you in a sort of a median life expectancy or a shorter life expectancy, and then also recognizing, okay, is there a spouse or other loved ones that are kind of dependent on those Social Security benefits in the portfolio, right? So there's a lot of variables that really should be taken into account there.
It is one of the more difficult questions to answer, and it really does come down to the unknown life expectancy. Just it dictates so much of it.
I'll wrap up here with one of our financial planning jokes. This is probably a good time for this, right? Talking about longevity. While your doctor is worried about you dying too soon, your financial advisor, we worry about you too, but we're worried about you living too long. Right, and outliving the portfolio. So just obviously in jest, but thank you so much, everybody. We're up on time. Appreciate everybody who logged in and stayed on throughout. As I mentioned earlier, more than happy to schedule a phone consult if anybody wants to reach out for that. And please, everyone, take care, stay safe, and we will be in touch soon.
Take care. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.